The fluorescent light above table 4 flickered like a conscience nobody bothered to fix. 2:17 a.m. The iron griddle smelled of burnt coffee and old grease, and something worse, desperation. Her hands trembled around the plate of eggs. 8 months pregnant. Second shift in a row. No insurance. No maternity leave. No one coming to relieve her. The baby kicked against the counter's edge as she leaned into it, and her swollen ankles screamed inside shoes held together by duct tape and stubbornness. Nobody asked if she was okay. Nobody ever did. But the man in the last booth hadn't touched his coffee. He sat perfectly still, watching her. He'd built a $4 billion company, but he had never seen anything that stopped him like this. What you just saw is not a movie scene. It is happening right now, tonight, in diners and gas stations and truck stops across America. Women working through their third trimester, because the richest country on earth does not guarantee a single day of paid maternity leave. Not one. Let that satisfying fact settle in your chest for a moment. Chantel has no idea who is sitting in that booth. And the man watching her has no idea that she is carrying a secret she has been hiding from everyone. Not her boss, not her coworker, not even her own mother. But what he does before sunrise will cost him $200 million, and he will do it without a second of hesitation. This is not just a story about a pregnant waitress and a billionaire in a diner at 2 a.m. This is about a system, a machine built to grind people like Chantel into dust and call it business. And tonight, that machine is about to meet someone it was not designed to handle. If you have ever worked a shift when your body was begging you to stop, stay with me. If you have ever smiled at a customer while your back was screaming and your feet were bleeding and your soul was somewhere else entirely, stay with me. This one is for you. And what happens next will change the way you see every late-night diner you have ever walked past without looking inside. The iron griddle sat on the shoulder of Highway 84 like something the road had forgotten. A squat cinder block rectangle with a gravel parking lot and a neon sign out front that was supposed to read open 24 hours. But the O and the H and the S had burned out 3 years ago and nobody had bothered to fix them. So now it just glowed Pen 24 in sickly pink against the Oregon night. Nobody knew what that meant. Nobody cared enough to ask. Inside the place smelled the way it always smelled. Burnt coffee sitting too long on the warmer. Bacon grease baked into the ceiling tiles. The faint chemical sweetness of industrial floor cleaner that never quite covered the smell underneath. The booths were upholstered in cracked red vinyl, patched with duct tape in places where the foam bulged through like wounds. The Formica counter had a long crack running down its center-stained brown from decades of spilled coffee. A jukebox sat in the corner dead since 2019, its glass face dark and dusty. Someone had taped an out-of-order sign on it. The tape had yellowed. The sign had curled. 60 miles south in Portland restaurants served $80 steaks to people who never thought about who cooked them. They poured $14 glasses of wine for couples who tipped 20% without thinking. Those restaurants had hostesses and sommeliers and line cooks who at least got overtime. The iron griddle had Chantel and Yvette, and whoever Dale could convince to work the graveyard shift for $11.50 an hour. Chantel Edwards was 28 years old, 8 months pregnant, and she had been on her feet for going on 14 hours straight. She had started working at the Iron Griddle 14 months ago, 3 weeks after Appleton's, the chain restaurant in Pendleton, had let her go. They called it restructuring. They said the position was being eliminated. But Chantel knew the real reason. She had started showing. Her manager had looked at her belly the way you look at a flat tire. Like a problem. Like an inconvenience. Like something that would slow everything down. There was no husband. Darnell had found out about the baby when she was 3 months along. He had gone quiet on the phone. He had said he needed time to think. And then he had blocked her number. Just like that. Like she was a subscription he had canceled. Her mother, Patrice, had suffered a mild stroke 6 months ago. The right side of her face still drooped slightly. Her speech came out slurred on bad days. She lived in Brookside Care, now a nursing facility 40 minutes east, $2,200 a month. every month. Without exception, without mercy. So Chantel did the math the way she did it every single night. $11.50 an hour. Tips that averaged somewhere between $23 and $40 on the graveyard shift, depending on how generous the truckers were feeling. Trailer park rent $875. Nursing home, $2,200. Utilities, gas for the car, food. She was short. Every month she was short. $400. Sometimes $5, sometimes $6. The math never worked. But she kept showing up anyway, because the math was all she had. Yvette Marshall was the only reason Chantel had not quit 3 months ago. Yvette was 43, mother of 3, and she had been pouring coffee at the Iron Griddle for 9 years. She knew every trucker's name. She knew which ones tipped and which ones did not. She knew how to carry 4 plates on 2 arms and make it look easy. She also knew what it looked like when a woman was breaking because she had broken once herself. Yvette would slip Chantel an extra $5 from her own tips when she thought nobody was watching. She would say, "Girl, sit down for a minute. I got table 6, whenever Dale disappeared into the back office. She brought Chantel ginger candies for the nausea and compression socks that she had bought at the dollar store. Small kindnesses. The kind that do not fix anything but keep you alive long enough to see tomorrow. But Yvette could not fix the system. She did not have insurance either. Nobody at the Iron Griddle did. Nobody should have to choose between their health and their rent. But Chantel chose every single day. Her shift had started at 10 p.m. Dale Buckner had made that clear when he posted the schedule on Monday. Chantel had asked just once if she could switch to the day shift, just until the baby came, just for a few weeks. Dale had looked at her over his reading glasses from behind the desk in his cramped back office, the one that smelled like stale cigarettes and old ketchup packets. Dale was 54. He owned 3 Iron Griddle franchise locations along Highway 84. He was not a cruel man. That was the worst part. He was not a villain who twirled his mustache and laughed at suffering. He was something worse. He was indifferent. He had looked at Chantel the way you look at a line item on a spreadsheet. A cost, a variable, a part that could be replaced. "I got a business to run," he said. "You want fewer hours. I will find someone who wants more." That was it. No negotiation, no compassion, no acknowledgement that the woman standing in front of him was growing a human being inside her body while serving pancakes to strangers at 2 in the morning. Just business. Just math. His math. So Chantel worked the graveyard, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Her second shift that day. She had already done the lunch rush, 11 to 4. 6 hours off. Not enough to sleep, barely enough to shower, eat a bowl of cereal, and sit on the edge of her bed with her hands on her belly, feeling the baby kick, counting the hours until she had to go back. The first customer came at 10:30. A long-haul trucker named Ray something, polite enough, ordered the meatloaf special and a coffee. $14.12. He left a $1 tip on the counter and walked out without making eye contact. Chantel picked up the $1. She did not feel anything. She had stopped feeling anything about tips months ago. $1 was $1. It would buy a banana and half a gallon of gas. By 11:15, a group of 4 college-aged kids stumbled through the door. Loud, laughing, the sharp, sweet smell of cheap beer and body spray. They ordered fries and milkshakes and made a mess of table 3. One of them knocked over a glass of Sprite. It spread across the table, dripped off the edge, pooled on the floor. They laughed about it, kept talking, did not say a word to Chantel. She walked over with a rag and a mop, bent down as far as her body would allow. The baby pressed against her ribs, her lower back seized. She inhaled through her teeth, mopped the sticky mess on her hands and knees, while 4 young people who had probably never worked a service job in their lives kept laughing about something on a phone screen. Nobody offered to help. Nobody even noticed. At 12:45 a.m., an elderly woman came in alone. White hair, thin coat. She ordered a cup of decaf and a slice of cherry pie that Chantel warmed up in the microwave because the Iron Griddle had not baked fresh pie since before she started. The woman sat by the window stirring her coffee slowly, staring out at the parking lot like she was waiting for someone who was not coming. When Chantel brought the check, the woman looked at her belly, then looked at her face, then looked at the clock on the wall. 1 a.m. "Honey," the woman said softly, "you should not be here." Chantel felt the sting behind her eyes, the sudden pressure in her throat that meant the tears were close. She swallowed hard. "I know, ma'am, but my baby needs to eat." The woman stared at her for a long moment. Then she left a $5 tip on a $3 cup of coffee and walked out into the dark without another word. At 1:30, Chantel locked herself in the employee bathroom. She sat on the closed toilet lid, her back against the cold tile wall. She had 3 minutes. That was the rule Dale had posted on the break room door. 3-minute bathroom breaks. Anything longer, and he docked your tips. He actually docked your tips. She unwrapped the compression bandage from her left ankle. The skin underneath was swollen and purple, angry. She rewrapped it tighter and tried not to think about what the doctor at the free clinic had said last week. You need to be off your feet. You need rest. The baby needs you to rest. Words that sounded beautiful and meant absolutely nothing when rest was not something you could afford. The baby kicked, hard, right against the bottom of her ribs. Chantel put both hands on her belly, closed her eyes. "Almost there, baby. Mama's almost there." She did not know if she was talking about the end of the shift or the end of the pregnancy or the end of something larger that she could not name. She just knew she had to stand up, walk back out, smile at the next trucker, pour the next cup of coffee, ignore the fire in her back and the swelling in her ankles and the voice in her head that whispered, "This is not right. This is not how it is supposed to be." She had Googled it once. 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Lying on the mattress in her trailer with her cracked phone balanced on her belly. Maternity Leave Rights, Oregon. The results had glowed in the dark bedroom. She had read that the United States was one of only 7 countries in the entire world that did not guarantee any paid maternity leave. Not a single day. She had read that Oregon paid leave had started in September 2023. That had sounded like hope. Then she had read the fine print. You had to have earned at least $1,000 in the base year from a qualifying employer. Dale's franchise had her classified in a way that made the math not work. Again, the math never worked. She stood up, washed her hands, looked at herself in the mirror. The circles under her eyes were so dark they looked like bruises. Her apron was stained. Her hair was pulled back so tight it made her temples ache. She was 28 years old, and she looked 40. She walked back out to the floor, smiled at no one, picked up the coffee pot, and kept going. Because that is what women like Chantel do. They keep going. Even when everything, the country, the system, their own bodies, is telling them to stop. The door opened at 2:17 a.m., and the cold came in first. A gust of October wind that rattled the menus in their plastic holder on the counter and made the overhead lights sway on their chains. Then the man. He came in alone. No driver, no entourage, no assistant trailing behind with a phone and a schedule. Just a man in a dark hoodie and worn jeans who looked like he had been driving for a very long time. He was tall, lean, the kind of lean that came from discipline, not hunger. Mid-40s maybe, close-cropped hair going silver at the temples, a face that carried something heavy behind the eyes. Everything about him said ordinary, except the shoes. They were John Lobb bespoke hand-stitched calfskin the color of old bourbon, the kind of shoes that cost $4,000 and never appeared in a truck stop diner on Highway 84. Chantel did not notice them. She would not have known what they meant if she had. But they were there. A quiet tell, like a poker player who controls everything except one small detail. Outside, a black Range Rover sat in the gravel lot between 2 18-wheelers. Its engine ticked in the cold. It had driven 4 hours east from Portland through the Columbia River Gorge, past the wind farms and the small towns and the empty stretches of high desert where the only light came from the stars. Marlon Reed had left his penthouse in the Pearl District at 10:15 that night. He had told no one where he was going. He had turned off his phone at the city limits. He had driven in silence, no music, No podcasts, no calls, just the hum of the engine and the sound of his own thoughts eating him alive. 8 hours earlier, the board of Reed Logistics Group had voted. 9-4. They wanted 4,000 layoffs across the distribution network. Warehouse workers, drivers, package handlers. The people who actually moved the freight. The people whose names never appeared in earnings reports, but whose labor made every quarterly number possible. The board called it optimization. Marlin called it what it was: sacrifice. Human sacrifice dressed up in a spreadsheet. He had argued against it for 3 hours. He had shown projections. He had offered alternatives, restructuring, temporary pay cuts at the executive level, a hiring freeze instead of a massacre. But the institutional investors wanted their margins. The hedge fund managers wanted their returns. And Marlin, despite owning 31% of the company he had built from a single truck and a cell phone, did not have enough votes to stop it. So he drove. Because when the world he built started to look like the world he had escaped driving was the only thing that kept him from breaking apart. Something about this place, the smell of old grease and burnt coffee and floor cleaner, hit him somewhere he had spent 30 years trying to forget. A memory he kept locked in a room at the back of his mind. A woman in an apron. A diner, just like this one. Swollen ankles. A smile that cost everything she had. He shook it off, sat down in the last booth. The vinyl creaked under his weight. Chantel appeared with a menu and a glass of water. She moved slowly, carefully, the way a person moves when every step is a negotiation with pain. Her hand gripped the pen too tight, and he could see the tremor in her fingers as she held the order pad. He saw the tremor in her writing hand. He saw the way she braced her lower back against the edge of the booth as she leaned forward. He saw the swelling above her shoes, angry and purple flesh pressed against leather that had stopped fitting weeks ago. And Marlin Reed, a man who had sat across from senators and Fortune 500 CEOs and never flinched, went completely still, because he had seen this before. Not this woman, not this diner, but this exact picture. The apron, the belly, the shoes falling apart, the smile that was really a mask held on by nothing but willpower and the knowledge that stopping was not an option. His mother had worn that same smile. In a diner just like this one. 32 years ago. The memory slammed into him so hard he forgot to breathe. He blinked, swallowed, pressed his palms flat against the table to stop his own hands from shaking. "Just coffee," he said. His voice came out rough. "Stripped. Black." Chantel nodded, turned, and walked back toward the counter. Marlin watched her go. Watched the way she pressed her hand against the small of her back when she thought no one was looking. Watched the baby shift inside her visible, even through the apron, and watched her wince and keep walking. His coffee sat untouched, growing cold. He did not care about the coffee. He could not stop watching her. And the thing that terrified him, the thing that made his chest tight and his throat close, was that he already knew how this story ended. He had lived it, and she was walking straight into the same ending, and she did not even know it. The diner had emptied out. The college kids were gone. The old woman was gone. Even the truckers had rolled back onto the highway, chasing deadlines in dawn. The only other person left was a long-haul driver 3 booths down his head, resting on his folded arms, snoring softly into the formica. Chantel came back to Marlin's booth with the coffee pot. She refilled his cup without asking. A reflex, muscle memory, pour, smile, move on. But he spoke before she could turn away. "How far along?" Chantel stopped, her hand still on the pot. Customers at the Iron Griddle did not ask personal questions. They ordered, they ate, they left. Sometimes they said thank you. Most of the time they did not. But nobody not once in 14 months had looked at her and asked about the baby. 8 months, she said. She said it the way you say a number that has become a countdown. Not with joy, not with dread, just with the weight of someone who knows exactly how many days are left and exactly how many of those days she will spend on her feet. She turned to go. But Marlin spoke again, quietly. Not a question this time, more like a recognition. And you are working the night shift. It was not judgment. Chantel had become an expert at detecting judgment. The tilt of the chin, the narrowing of the eyes, the way people looked at her belly and then at the diner and did the math in their heads. This was not that. This was something else. This was the voice of someone who had seen this before. She looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time. Past the hoodie and the stubble and the tired eyes, there was something in his face that she could not name. Not pity. Pity made her stomach turn. This was closer to grief. My mother used to work a place like this, he said. 5 words. That was all it took. 5 words, and the wall that Chantel had built around herself, the one made of overtime hours and forced smiles and the daily practice of pretending everything was fine, cracked. Just a little. Just enough. She sat down across from him. Just for a second, she told herself. Just while the diner was empty. Dale was in the back doing inventory. Yvette was wiping down the grill. Does this place offer any kind of leave? Marlon asked. Chantel laughed. It was a short sound, sharp. The kind of laugh that comes out when the question is so far from your reality that it sounds like a joke. Leave. I took 1 bathroom break in 6 hours, and Dale docked my tips. Marlon's jaw tightened. His knuckles went white around the coffee cup. He did not say anything, he just listened. And something about the way he listened, the stillness of it, the way he did not interrupt or offer solutions or tell her it would be okay, made Chantel keep talking. The Family Medical Leave Act does not cover me, she said. The business has to have at least 50 employees. Dale has got 11 across 3 locations. So technically, legally, he does not have to give me a single day off. Medicaid covers the birth, but it does not cover the weeks after. If I stop working, I stop getting paid. If I stop getting paid, my mother loses her bed at the nursing home. And if that happens, I do not know what I do. She said it all, in a flat voice. The voice of someone who has explained their situation so many times to so many agencies and caseworkers and automated phone systems that the words have lost their edges. They just come out smooth and hard like stones polished by a river. Marlon listened. And inside him, beneath the calm exterior and the steady hands, something was breaking. Because every word Chantel said he had heard before. Not from her, from his mother. 30 years ago, in a different diner, in a different state, with the same fluorescent lights and the same smell of burnt coffee and the same impossible math, he did not tell her that, not yet. What about the father? He asked. Chantel's expression did not change. Blocked my number when I was 3 months along. Have not heard from him since. She said it like she was reading a weather report. Tuesday. Partly cloudy. Chance of rain. Father gone. Moving on. You have family. Anyone who can help. My mother. She had a stroke 6 months ago. She is in a care facility. $2,200 a month. I am the only one she has got. Marlon looked down at his coffee. Black. Cold now. He wrapped both hands around the cup like he was holding on to something to keep from falling. How do you make it work? He asked quietly. Chantel stared at him for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone. The screen was cracked in 3 places. She opened her calendar and turned it toward him. 6 days a week, 10 to 12 hours a day, color-coded, blue for morning shifts, red for nights. The red outnumbered the blue 3 to 1. After nursing home rent, utilities, and gas, she said, I have got $127 a month left. For food, for everything. I have not bought new clothes in 11 months. She paused. I do the math every night before I go to sleep. And every morning when I wake up, the numbers never change. They just sit there, staring at me. As Chantel spoke, Marlon heard another voice, his mother's, saying almost the same words. 30 years ago. To a God who was not listening. He wanted to tell her. He wanted to say, I know. I know because I watched my mother do this. I know because I grew up in a trailer behind a diner just like this one. I know because the system you are describing, the one that is crushing you right now, is the same system that killed the woman who gave me everything. But he did not say any of that, because the words were too big, and the diner was too small. And some truths need more than a 2 a.m. conversation to hold them. Chantel stood up, smoothed her apron, put the mask back on. I am not asking for charity, she said. I am asking for a country that does not make you choose between your baby and your bills." She picked up the coffee pot and walked away. Marlon watched her go. He looked at his watch. 3:15 a.m. He had been sitting in this booth for nearly an hour. He had spent 20 years solving problems worth billions. But the problem standing in front of him in a stained apron with swollen ankles felt bigger than all of them combined. Chantel does not know who is sitting in that booth, and Marlon does not know yet what he is about to do. But what happens in the next 20 minutes will set off a chain of events that neither of them can stop. Here is something most people do not know. The United States of America, the richest nation in the history of the world, is one of only 7 countries on the entire planet that does not guarantee a single day of paid maternity leave. Not one. Every year, roughly 250,000 women are denied basic workplace accommodations during pregnancy. They are told to work through the pain or lose their jobs. They are told the law does not apply because the company is too small. They are told, in 1,000 quiet ways, that their bodies are an inconvenience. Let that sink in. What Marlon does before sunrise will not just change Chantel's life. It will force him to confront a ghost he has been running from for 30 years, a memory he locked away the day his mother died, a debt he has been trying to repay to a woman who is no longer alive to collect it. If you have ever been the person nobody saw, stay with me. If you have ever been the one carrying the weight while the world looked right through you, do not leave. This story is about to turn, and you need to see what happens next. It happened at 3:27 a.m. Chantel was in the back storage room. Dale had told her to restock the dry goods shelf before the morning crew arrived. 50-pound bags of flour, cases of canned tomatoes, industrial-sized containers of cooking oil. Work that was supposed to be done by the stock boy, a 19-year-old named Travis, who had called in sick for the 3rd time that week. But Dale did not hire a replacement because replacements cost money and Chantel was already here. She lifted a case of tomatoes. 12 cans, maybe 25 pounds. The baby shifted as she straightened up, pressing against her diaphragm. Her breath caught. She adjusted her grip, took a step. Her right foot hit something slick on the concrete floor. A streak of cooking oil that had leaked from a container someone had not sealed properly. Her shoe, the one with the worn sole and the duct tape patch, found no traction. Her ankle turned, her knee buckled, and Chantel went down. She did not fall hard. She caught herself partly on the shelf, partly on her forearm. But her belly hit the edge of a lower shelf on the way down, and the impact sent a shock of pain through her entire body. She gasped, rolled onto her side. Both hands flew to her stomach. The baby kicked, hard. Then again, frantic little movements that felt like panic. "It is okay," Chantel whispered. "It is okay, baby. We are okay." But her hands were shaking, and the pain in her lower abdomen was sharp and spreading. And she was lying on a storage room floor at 3:30 in the morning, 8 months pregnant, and the only thought in her head was, please do not let me lose this baby in the back of a truck stop diner. The crash brought Dale out of his office. He appeared in the doorway with a clipboard in one hand and a look of irritation on his face. He looked at the floor, at the scattered cans, at Chantel, on her side with her arms wrapped around her belly. "Did you break anything?" he said. He meant the cans. He meant the shelf. He meant the inventory. He did not mean her body. He did not mean her baby. He meant his product. Chantel stared at him from the floor. "I'm fine," she said. The words came out automatic, programmed, the response of a woman who had learned that her pain was not relevant to the people who signed her paychecks. "Then get up," Dale said. "Table 6 needs clearing." That was the moment. That was the line. Not a dramatic line. Not a line drawn in the sand with a sword. Just a man in a wrinkled polo shirt telling a pregnant woman on a concrete floor to get up and bus a table. The banality of cruelty. The ordinary machinery of a system that does not see people. Only labor. Yvette came running from the kitchen. She dropped to her knees beside Chantel and put a hand on her back. Girl, Are you okay? Talk to me. I slipped, Chantel said. I am okay. The baby is moving. I think we are okay. Yvette looked up at Dale. Her eyes were hard. She needs to sit down, Dale. She is 8 months pregnant. And I am 8 months behind on my franchise payments, Dale said. He did not even have the decency to sound cruel. He just sounded tired. We all got problems, Yvette. Marlon appeared behind Dale. He had heard the crash from his booth. He had heard Chantel's gasp. He had crossed the diner in 4 strides, moving with the kind of quiet purpose that made people step aside without knowing why. Are you okay? He asked Chantel. His voice was low, controlled, but his eyes were burning. Do you need a hospital? Chantel shook her head. She was already trying to stand. Embarrassment and fear fighting for control of her face. Fear of the pain. Fear of what the fall meant. But more than anything, fear of losing this job. Because losing this job meant losing her mother's bed at the nursing home. And losing that meant losing everything. I am fine, she said. I just slipped. Marlon helped her to her feet. Then he turned to Dale. Slowly. The way a man turns when he is deciding exactly how much force to use. You are going to let her keep working, Marlon said. It was not a question. Dale sized him up. Hoodie. Jeans. Just another customer with an opinion. Listen, buddy, I do not tell you how to do your job. Do not tell me how to run mine. Marlon took a step closer. His voice dropped. You are right, but I am telling you. If she falls again, and something happens to that baby, you will not just lose an employee. You will lose everything. Every franchise. Every dollar. Everything you have built. Because I promise you someone will be watching. And when they are, you will wish you had given her a chair instead of a clipboard. Dale's face twitched. Something in Marlon's voice, in the absolute certainty of it, landed differently than a regular customer's complaint. This was not a man making a threat. This was a man stating a fact. The way an engineer states the load-bearing capacity of a beam. Neutral, precise, final. Fine, Dale said. He stepped back. 15 minutes. Take a break. He turned to walk away, then added over his shoulder. Clock is ticking. Yvette guided Chantel to a booth, brought her water, pressed a cold rag against the back of her neck. You sure you are okay, honey? You sure the baby is okay? She is kicking, Chantel said. She put her hand on her belly. She is angry, but she is kicking. That is good. Right. That is good. Marlon sat down across from her. The booth creaked. The fluorescent light above them buzzed and flickered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Just the sound of Yvette's shoes squeaking on the floor as she walked back to the kitchen. Just the hum of the coffee machine. Just the clock on the wall ticking off the 15 minutes that Dale had rationed out like they were gold. Then Marlon spoke, quietly, almost to himself. My mother fell too, in a place just like this. Chantel looked at him. His eyes were somewhere far away, somewhere 30 years deep and 2,000 miles south. He blinked, came back. She was carrying me, he said. She worked until the day before I was born. He stopped, pressed his lips together. The muscles in his jaw worked like he was chewing on something too hard to swallow. What happened to her? Chantel asked softly. Marlon looked at her. And for the first time all night, the mask he wore, the one built from 2 decades of boardrooms and billion-dollar negotiations, and the practiced art of never showing weakness, slipped. She did not make it, he said. Not right away, but later. The damage was already done. Working like that on her feet, no rest, no help. It broke something inside her that the doctors could not fix. She died when I was 11. The words sat between them like stones. Chantel reached across the table. She did not take his hand. She just placed her fingers near his on the cold formica close enough that he could feel the warmth of another person, close enough to say, I hear you. How did you get through it? She asked. I did not, Marlon said. I just kept moving. Chantel nodded. Because she understood that. The mechanics of survival. The way you put one foot in front of the other, not because you are brave, but because stopping is not something the world allows you. Marlon straightened up, took a breath, and something shifted behind his eyes. something that looked like a decision being made. Tell me everything, he said. Not about tonight, about all of it, how you ended up here. Chantel studied his face. She had become very good at reading people. You had to be working graveyard shifts in a truck stop diner. You learned to spot the drunks, the creeps, the ones who wanted something. This man did not want anything. He just wanted to know. So she told him. She told him about Appleton's, about the job she had, loved the one where she had worked her way up from hostess to assistant manager in 2 years. About the morning her supervisor called her into the office 3 weeks after she had told them about the pregnancy and handed her a separation agreement. They called it a restructuring. There was no restructuring. Her replacement started the following Monday. She told him about the lawyer she had called, a woman in Portland who specialized in workplace discrimination. The consultation was free. The retainer was $5,000. She might as well have said $5 million. She told him about Darnell, about the phone call when she told him she was pregnant, the silence that went on for so long she thought the connection had dropped, and then his voice flat and distant saying, "I need some time to think about this." He blocked her number 2 days later. She found out through a mutual friend that he had moved to Phoenix. She never heard from him again. She told him about Patrice, her mother, the woman who had raised her alone, working 2 jobs, never complaining, the stroke that had come without warning on a Tuesday afternoon, the ambulance, the ICU. The moment the doctor said the words, "She is going to need long-term care," and Chantel had felt the floor tilt beneath her feet because she knew exactly what those words cost, $2,200 a month. Every month, no exceptions. As Chantel spoke, Marlon sat very still. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago. He did not touch it. He just listened, and with every sentence, every detail, every number, something inside him was matching, lining up, like a lock finding its key. Because his mother had told the same story. Different names, different cities, same architecture, same invisible walls. The same system designed to catch people like Chantel and hold them exactly where they were, not low enough to qualify for help, not high enough to survive. "You have tried applying for any kind of disability?" Marlon asked. Chantel looked at him the way a teacher looks at a student who has just asked why the sky is blue. "I am not disabled," she said. "I am pregnant. Different thing in this country." She paused. Then she said, "You know what I did one night? 3 a.m. Could not sleep. I Googled how many countries guarantee paid maternity leave. You know how many? 186. Out of 193. The United States is not one of them. We are in the same category as Papua New Guinea. And I thought I live in a country that can put a robot on Mars, but cannot figure out how to let a pregnant woman rest for 6 weeks without losing everything." She was not crying. Her voice was steady. This was not self-pity. This was testimony. The calm, exhausted recitation of someone who had studied the walls of her own prison and memorized every brick. She pulled out her phone again. The cracked screen glowed in the dim booth. She opened the calculator app and turned it toward Marlon. On the screen was a simple equation. Income minus nursing home minus rent minus utilities minus gas minus food. $127, she said. That is what is left every month. For me, for the baby, for everything. I have not bought new clothes in 11 months. I cut my own hair. I eat whatever Yvette brings me from the kitchen because I cannot afford groceries and gas in the same week. She put the phone down, looked Marlon in the eyes. I am not asking for charity, she said. I am asking for a country that does not make you choose between your baby and your bills. The sentence hung in the air between them. It did not need a response. It was not a request. It was a verdict. Marlon walked out of the Iron Griddle at 3:52 a.m. The gravel crunched under his shoes. The October air hit his face like a slap. He climbed into the Range Rover and sat in the dark with the engine off, his hands on the steering wheel, his forehead pressed against his knuckles. He could still see her. The apron, the swollen ankles, the way she pressed her hand against the small of her back when she thought nobody was looking, the way she smiled at customers who did not deserve her smile. The way she said $127 like it was a life sentence. Because it was. He pulled out his phone, turned it on for the first time in 6 hours. 43 missed calls, 81 emails, 3 texts from Kendrick Hayes, his COO and the only person on earth Marlon trusted completely. The texts said, "Where are you?" Then bored is asking questions. "Then call me." Marlon called him. It rang 4 times. "It is 4 a.m. Marlon." Kendrick's voice was thick with sleep. "Someone better be dying." "Someone is?" Marlon said. "Just not the way you think." Silence on the other end. Then the sound of Kendrick sitting up in bed, sheets rustling, a lamp clicking on. "Talk to me." Marlon talked. He told Kendrick about the iron griddle, about Chantel, about Dale, about the fall in the storage room and the 15-minute break rationed like medicine, about a pregnant woman making $11.50 an hour with no insurance and no leave and no options. He told it all in the flat, controlled voice of a man who was holding himself together by force of will. When he finished, Kendrick was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want to do?" Kendrick asked. "I want to know if this franchise is in violation of federal labor law, the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, OSHA workplace safety, overtime regulations, workers' compensation insurance. All of it. I want it on my desk in 72 hours. Done. Anything else?" Marlon stared through the windshield at the diner. Through the glass, he could see Chantel wiping down the counter. Her back curved like a question mark. "Not yet," he said. He hung up. Sat for another minute. Then he reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a business card. Plain white. Black text. Marlon Reed. His personal number, not the office line that went through 3 assistants. The number that maybe 7 people in the world had. He turned the card over, found a pen in the center console, wrote 6 words on the back. "This is not charity. Call me." Then he paused, crossed out "call me," wrote instead, "call when the baby comes." He went back inside. The bell above the door jingled. Chantel looked up from the counter. He walked to his booth. His coffee cup was still there, cold, untouched for over an hour. The check sat next to it. $1.75. Marlon placed the card face down on the table. Then he reached into his wallet and pulled out $500 bills. He did not fan them out. He did not make a show. He folded them once and placed them under the coffee saucer, quietly. The way you leave something you want someone to find after you are gone. He stood up, looked at Chantel one more time. She was leaning against the counter, one hand on her belly, the other holding a rag. Her eyes were half closed, exhaustion pulling at every part of her. He wanted to say something. He wanted to say, "You remind me of someone I lost." He wanted to say, "You deserve better than this." He wanted to say, "I am going to fix this." But he had spent 20 years in rooms full of people who made promises they never kept. And he knew that words from a stranger at 4 a.m. were just air, pretty weightless, gone by sunrise. So he said nothing. He walked out. The bell jingled again. The door closed. The Range Rover's headlights cut through the dark. And then he was gone. Chantel cleared the booth 5 minutes later. She picked up the saucer. The bills fell onto the table. $500. Her hand flew to her mouth. She counted them. 5 $500 bills. She looked toward the parking lot. Empty. Just the trucks in the dark and the highway stretching in both directions toward nothing. Then she saw the card. She picked it up, turned it over. Read the handwriting. "This is not charity. Call when the baby comes." She flipped it back. Marlon Reed. The name meant nothing to her. She pulled out her cracked phone, typed his name into the search bar with trembling thumbs. The screen loaded slowly. Then the results appeared. Marlon Reed, Chief Executive Officer, Reed Logistics Group, net worth, $4.2 billion. She nearly dropped the phone. Her knees went soft. She grabbed the edge of the booth to steady herself. A billionaire, the man in the hoodie with the sad eyes and the cold coffee, a billionaire had been sitting in her diner for 2 hours, listening to her, talking to her about his mother. and she had told him everything. The nursing home, the tips, the $127. Her first instinct was to chase after him, to give back the money, because that is who Chantel was, the woman who did not take things she had not earned. But $500 was this month's trailer rent. $500 was the difference between keeping the lights on and sitting in the dark with her belly and her fear, and no way forward. She looked at the money, looked at her stomach, looked at the card, looked at her stomach again. She kept the money, but she did not call the number. Not that night, not the next morning, not the day after, because pride was the only thing Chantel Edwards had that was not for sale. And calling a billionaire felt like putting a price tag on the one thing she had left. She folded the card and put it in her apron pocket, next to the photo of the ultrasound, two things she could not afford to lose. Chantel just did what most of us would struggle with. She kept her pride when everything inside her was screaming to reach for help. $500 in her pocket and a billionaire's phone number next to her baby's first picture, and she chose silence. She chose to stand on her own two swollen feet and keep going. But here is what Chantel does not know. Marlon Reed is not the kind of man who waits for a phone call. He has already set something in motion. Something that will uncover every violation, every shortcut, every law that Dale Buckner has been breaking while his employees suffered in silence. What happens 72 hours from now will force both of them into a situation neither one expected, and the villain is not Dale. Dale is just a symptom. The real villain is something much bigger, much older, and much harder to fight. It is a system that was designed on purpose to make people like Chantel invisible. There is a reason Marlon cannot sleep, a reason he drove 4 hours into the middle of nowhere at 2 in the morning. And when Chantel finds out what that reason is, it will change everything she thought she knew about that night at the diner. Subscribe now, because the next chapter of this story will test everything you believe about fairness in America, and you do not want to miss what comes next. 3 days later, Marlon Reed walked back into the Iron Griddle. But this time everything was different. It was 11:30 in the morning. Daylight poured through the windows, exposing every crack in the formica, every stain on the ceiling tiles, every piece of duct tape on the booth cushions that the darkness had been kind enough to hide. The diner looked worse in the light, like a wound that had been covered by a bandage for too long. Marlon was not wearing a hoodie. He wore a charcoal suit. Tom Ford. No tie. His shoes were polished. His jaw was set. Behind him, through the window, a black Escalade idled in the parking lot with a driver behind the wheel. Not the Range Rover. Not the man who had wandered in alone at 2 a.m., looking for coffee and silence. This was the other version of Marlon Reed, the one that boardrooms feared. Chantel was behind the counter filling ketchup bottles when the door opened. She looked up. Her hands stopped moving. The ketchup bottle hovered in midair. It was him, the man from 3 nights ago. But not the same man. The hoodie was gone. The sadness was still there, but it was buried, now layered beneath something harder, something with purpose. "You did not call," he said. Chantel set the ketchup bottle down slowly. "I do not take handouts." "Good." Marlon pulled out a chair at the counter and sat down. "Because I am not offering one." Chantel stared at him. The other waitress on shift, a girl named Tamika, who had started 2 weeks ago, was watching from the kitchen window with wide eyes. The 2 truckers at table 3 had stopped eating. "I came back because I need to tell you something," Marlon said. His voice was low enough that only Chantel could hear. "This diner is breaking the law. Not in small ways. In big ones." He reached into his jacket and placed a manila envelope on the counter. Chantel did not touch it. "My team spent the last 3 days looking into this franchise," Marlon continued. "Your employer has not been paying overtime in compliance with federal law. He has no valid workers' compensation insurance. He has been requiring you to perform duties that violate the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, which has been federal law since June of 2023. The storage room incident, the heavy lifting, the denial of bathroom breaks, all of it illegal." Chantel's face did not change, but her hands gripped the edge of the counter. Her knuckles went pale. "Why do you care?" she asked. "Because I have seen what happens when nobody cares," Marlon said. And I promised myself a long time ago that I would not be that person. Chantel glanced toward the back office. Dale's door was closed. She could hear him on the phone laughing about something. The sound made her stomach tighten. "If he finds out about this," she said quietly, "he will fire me. If he fires you for asserting your legal rights, that is retaliation. And that is a federal offense. You do not understand." Chantel's voice dropped to a whisper. "I need this job for 4 more weeks, just until the baby comes. That is all. 4 weeks." The words landed like a body hitting the floor. 4 weeks. That was all she was asking for. Not a raise, not a promotion, not a corner office. Just 28 more days of standing on her swollen feet in a truck stop diner so she could keep a roof over her head and her mother in a nursing home long enough to deliver her baby. And the system could not even give her that. Marlon looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. "I hear you," he said. "I am not here to blow up your life. I am here to make sure you know your rights. What you do with that information is your choice. I will respect whatever you decide." The back office door opened. Dale Buckner stepped out. He was holding a mug of coffee and wearing a polo shirt with a grease stain on the collar. He saw Marlon immediately. The suit, the Escalade outside, the manila envelope on the counter. Dale's expression shifted. Not fear exactly, but the particular alertness of a man who recognizes trouble before it introduces itself. "Can I help you?" Dale said, walking over. His voice had the forced friendliness of a used car salesman. "I am a customer," Marlon said, without turning around. "And I am also someone who is very interested in how you run this establishment." Dale looked at Chantel, then back at Marlon. "Are you a health inspector or something?" "Something," Marlon said. Dale set his mug down. His jaw tightened. "Listen, I do not know who you are, but if you have got a problem with my restaurant, there are proper channels." Marlon turned on his stool, slowly, the way a man turns when he wants you to see every inch of the calm on his face. "Do your employees receive overtime pay for hours worked beyond 40 per week?" Dale blinked. "That is none of your business." "It is somebody's business," Marlon said. "And sooner or later somebody is going to make it theirs." The two men stared at each other. Dale's face reddened. Marlon's did not move. The moment stretched, like a wire pulled tight. Then Marlon stood. He buttoned his jacket, looked at Chantel one more time, picked up the manila envelope and placed it gently in front of her. "Read this tonight," he said. "Then decide what you want to do. Whatever you decide, I will respect it. Inside, you will find a summary of your rights under federal and Oregon state law, a phone number for the Department of Labor, and the card of a very good attorney named Kendrick Hayes. He does not charge for consultations." Marlon walked toward the door. Dale watched him go with the expression of a dog that has just heard a sound it cannot identify. The Escalade pulled away. The gravel settled, and Chantel stood behind the counter with a manila envelope in her hands and a decision growing inside her that was almost as heavy as the baby. Dale called her into the office 45 minutes later. He closed the door, sat behind his desk. The desk was a folding table covered with invoices and fast food wrappers. The chair was a plastic lawn chair. The office smelled like old cigarettes and stale ambition. "I do not know who that man was," Dale said. His voice was even, but his eyes were hard. "But if you are bringing drama into my restaurant, you are done. I have got 15 applications on file from people who would kill for your hours. We clear." Chantel stood in front of him, her hands clasped over her belly, her back aching, her ankles throbbing. "Clear," she said. "Good." Dale picked up a pen. "One more thing. I am adjusting your schedule. Effective this week, you are down to 20 hours. Doctor's recommendation." Chantel's blood went cold. "I never saw a doctor. You never asked me to see a doctor." "It is a precautionary measure," Dale said. He did not look up from the paper he was pretending to read. "For your health and the health of the baby. Company policy." There was no company policy. There had never been a company policy. Chantel knew this because she had read the employee handbook, all 6 pages of it, and the word pregnancy did not appear once. 20 hours. Half her current schedule, half her income. She did the math instantly the way she always did, automatically, mercilessly. 20 hours at $11.50 an hour. $230 a week before taxes. After taxes, roughly $190. That was $760 a month. Nursing home alone was $2,200. The numbers did not work. They had never worked. But now, they did not even come close. She walked out of the office on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. Yvette was waiting by the coffee station. She took one look at Chantel's face and knew. "He cut your hours," Yvette said. It was not a question. Chantel nodded. 20. Yvette closed her eyes. He did the same thing to Maria last year. Cut her hours week by week until she could not make rent. Then she quit. And when she filed for unemployment, Dale told the state she had left voluntarily. They denied her claim. Chantel felt the floor tilt slightly. He has done this before. 3 times that I know of. Every time someone complained or asked for something he did not want to give, he does not fire you. He just makes it impossible for you to stay. Then he calls it your choice. The genius of cruelty. The elegance of a system designed to crush without leaving fingerprints. That night, Chantel sat in her trailer. The baby was restless, kicking and turning like she could feel her mother's heartbeat racing. The manila envelope lay on the kitchen table. Chantel had not opened it at the diner. She had been too afraid, too aware of Dale's eyes on her back. Now alone in the yellow light of a single lamp, she opened it. Inside was a 4-page document, typed, clear, written in language a person without a law degree could actually understand. It explained the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. It explained that employers with 15 or more employees were required to provide reasonable accommodations for pregnancy-related conditions. Dale's franchise, when you counted all 3 locations, had 27 employees. He qualified. He had always qualified. He just never told anyone. The document explained overtime regulations. It explained that any hours worked beyond 40 in a week had to be compensated at 1.5 times the regular rate. Chantel had worked over 50 hours a week for months. She had never received overtime pay. Not once. It explained workers' compensation insurance requirements. It explained that retaliatory reduction of hours after an employee raised safety concerns was a violation of federal law. Every single thing Dale had done, every cut, every shortcut, every moment Chantel had felt trapped and powerless and alone, all of it was illegal, and she had never known, because nobody had ever told her. She thought about the statistic she had read once on her cracked phone at 3 in the morning. 60% of workers in small businesses did not know their basic labor rights. Not because they were stupid, because the system was designed to keep them uninformed. Ignorance was not a bug, it was a feature. Chantel looked at the ultrasound photo on the refrigerator. Her daughter, a girl. She had found out at the 20-week scan and cried for an hour, not from sadness. From the terrifying weight of knowing she was bringing another woman into a world that had so little patience for them, she looked at the nursing home invoice pinned next to it. $2,200, due in 11 days. She looked at Kendrick Hayes's card. Attorney at law. Stanford. Former Department of Justice. She picked up her phone. Her thumb hovered over the number on the card. Kendrick Hayes. The smart call. The safe call. The professional call. But she did not dial Kendrick. She dialed Marlon. It rang twice. "Marlon," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hand was shaking so hard she had to press the phone against her ear with both palms. "You said to call if I needed anything." "I did. I need help, not money. I need someone to help me fight." Silence on the other end. 1 second, 2, then Marlon's voice, quiet, certain, like a door opening that would never close again. "Then we fight," he said. Chantel hung up, put the phone down, placed both hands on her belly, felt her daughter kick against her palms. And for the first time in months, Chantel Edwards was not just surviving, she was choosing. The meeting was in Portland, A glass tower downtown, the kind of building Chantel had only ever seen from the highway. A smear of chrome and blue sky that belonged to a world she had never been invited into. Kendrick Hayes's office was on the 14th floor. The elevator was silent. The carpet was thick. The receptionist offered her sparkling water in a glass that probably cost more than her tips for a week. Chantel sat in a leather chair that felt like it was trying to swallow her. She wore the only outfit she owned that was not a uniform. A black maternity dress from Goodwill and flat shoes that still pinched her swollen feet. She felt like an imposter. A truck stop waitress in a law firm that charged more per hour than she made in a month. Marlon was already there. He sat across the conference table in a gray sweater. No suit today, no power play, just a man in a chair. He nodded when she walked in, did not stand, did not make a scene, just nodded, like she belonged. Kendrick Hayes was tall and precise with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of posture that came from years of standing in front of judges. He shook Chantel's hand firmly. No softness, no pity, just respect. Before they started, before the documents came out and the legal language began, Chantel turned to Marlon. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You do not know me." Marlon looked at the table, then at the window, then at Chantel. And something in his face changed. The mask he always wore, the one made of boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions, and the careful practice of never letting anyone see him bleed, came apart at the seams. "My mother's name was Denise," he said. "Denise Reed. She worked at a truck stop diner outside Montgomery, Alabama, Route 65, a place called Duke's Pit Stop. She was a waitress. She was pregnant with me." His voice was steady, but his hands were not. He pressed them flat against the table the same way he had pressed them against the booth at the Iron Griddle 3 nights ago. She worked until her 37th week. She had a condition called preeclampsia, high blood pressure, swelling, headaches that made her vision blur, but she did not have insurance, and she could not afford to miss a shift. Because if she missed a shift, she could not pay the rent on our trailer, and if she could not pay the rent, we would be on the street. So she worked. He paused, swallowed. The muscles in his jaw worked. She went into labor 3 weeks early. On the floor of Duke's Pit Stop, the ambulance took 22 minutes to arrive. I was born in the emergency room of a county hospital that was already over capacity. I weighed 4 pounds 11 ounces. I survived. Another pause. Longer this time. She survived too. At first, but the preeclampsia had damaged her kidneys. Badly. The kind of damage that does not show up right away. The kind that sits inside you and waits. She needed a transplant. Medicaid would not cover it. Not fully. Not in Alabama. Not in 1991. She was on the waiting list for 3 years. She died when I was 11. In a hospital room that smelled like bleach, holding my hand. The room was silent. Kendrick stared at a point on the table. He had heard this story before, but hearing it again did not make it lighter. "She made $4.25 an hour," Marlon said. "Federal minimum wage, 1991. She also got her hours cut when she started showing. She also did not know her rights. She also had a boss who treated her like a replaceable part. She also fell. She also kept getting up. And 30 years later, her son built a $4 billion company. And he still cannot save her." His voice cracked on the last word. His eyes were wet. But he did not cry. He held it, the way he had been holding it for 30 years. Because that was how he survived. You hold it until the holding becomes the shape of you. "I built all of this," he said quietly. "I can move legislation. I can lobby senators. I can fund campaigns and build foundations and put my name on buildings. But I could not save my mother. She died because nobody in that diner, nobody in that town, nobody in that system thought she was worth protecting." Chantel sat very still, her hands on her belly, her daughter moving beneath her palms. "So I am not a project," she said softly. "I am a ghost." Marlon looked at her. And for the first time in the entire story, his expression was completely unguarded. No mask, no distance. Just a man sitting across from a woman who was living the life his mother had died in. "No," he said, "you are a second chance." The words filled the room the way light fills a space when you open a window that has been shut for years. Not dramatic, not loud, just present, undeniable, true. Two broken people in a lawyer's office in Portland, bound by a grief that crossed 30 years and 2,000 miles. And for the first time, neither of them was alone in it. Now you know. This was never just about a tip at a truck stop. This was never just about a pregnant waitress and a billionaire who could not sleep. This is about a system. A machine that crushed Marlon's mother 30 years ago in Alabama and is trying to crush Chantel right now in Oregon. Same machine, different decade, same result. But Marlon Reed did not build a $4 billion company by accepting things the way they are. He built it by looking at broken systems and refusing to walk away. And what he does next will turn Dale Buckner's franchise into the most watched labor case in the state of Oregon. And Chantel, the woman who was too proud to make a phone call, the woman who kept a billionaire's business card next to her baby's ultrasound and chose silence, is about to become the face of a movement she never asked to lead. If this story has already hit you, hit that subscribe button. Because the way this ends, you absolutely need to see it. Do not go anywhere. Kendrick Hayes did not become one of the most respected employment attorneys in the Pacific Northwest by accident. Stanford Law. 4 years at the Department of Justice. A reputation for taking cases that other firms considered too small, too messy, too political. He was the kind of lawyer who wore wire-rimmed glasses and spoke in complete sentences and made opposing counsel sweat without ever raising his voice. When Marlon called him that night, at 4 a.m., from a truck stop parking lot, Kendrick had thought it was about the board vote, about the 4,000 layoffs, about the corporate war that had been consuming both of them for weeks. Instead, Marlon told him about a diner, a waitress, a man named Dale, and Kendrick, who had spent his career studying the architecture of workplace exploitation, recognized the blueprint immediately. It took his team 3 days. 3 days of pulling public records, cross-referencing franchise filings, reviewing OSHA inspection reports, and making quiet phone calls to former employees. What they found was not surprising, but it was damning. Dale Buckner's franchise operation was not just cutting corners at the Iron Griddle. He was cutting corners at all 3 locations. 27 employees across the 3 diners. The majority were women. Most were single mothers. Several were women of color. None had been paid overtime in compliance with federal law. The timesheets had been manually edited, shaving 15 to 30 minutes off each shift every week for 6 years. Workers' compensation insurance had lapsed 8 months ago. Dale had never renewed it. If Chantel had been seriously injured in that fall in the storage room, there would have been no coverage, nothing. She would have been on her own with a hospital bill and a baby on the way, and a man who would have told the investigators that she slipped because she was careless. The Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, signed into federal law in June of 2023, required employers with 15 or more employees to provide reasonable accommodations for pregnancy-related conditions. Dale's franchise qualified. He had 27 people on payroll, and the law was clear. Heavy lifting restrictions, adequate break time, modified duties, a stool to sit on during slow periods, basic human decency, codified into statute because apparently the country needed a law to mandate what should have been obvious. Dale had provided none of it. Not because he did not know, because he did not care. Because the gap between the law on paper and the law in practice was wide enough to drive a truck through, and Dale had been driving through it for years. Kendrick filed the complaint on a Tuesday morning. 2 filings, one with the Oregon Bureau of Labor and Industries, one with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Chantel Edwards named plaintiff. She had signed the paperwork in Kendrick's office the day before, her hand shaking, the pen leaving uneven lines on the signature page. Marlon had sat across the table watching, not pushing, not promising, just watching. "If this goes public," Chantel had said, her voice barely above a whisper, "no one will hire me again." Marlon had looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "If this stays silent, nothing changes for anyone." Dale found out about the complaint 48 hours later. His response was swift, predictable, and exactly what Kendrick had anticipated. He hired a franchise law firm out of Salem. Small, cheap, aggressive. The kind of firm that made its money not by winning cases but by making the process so expensive and exhausting that plaintiffs gave up before discovery. They sent a letter to Chantel's home address, a trailer in a park off Highway 84. The letter accused her of defamation. It threatened legal action. It used words like malicious and knowingly false and damages in excess of, and it was designed to do one thing: scare her into silence. The same week, Dale terminated Chantel's employment. The official reason listed on the separation paperwork was poor performance and insubordination. Two words that meant nothing and everything. Two words that had been used 1,000,000 times against 1,000,000 workers who had committed the unforgivable sin of knowing their rights. Chantel was now unemployed. 8.5 months pregnant, 3 weeks from her due date. No income, no insurance beyond Medicaid, a nursing home bill due in 9 days, and a legal threat sitting on her kitchen table next to a stack of unpaid bills. Marlon did not write her a check. He wanted to. Every instinct in him screamed to wire money to solve the immediate crisis, to throw resources at the problem, the way he threw resources at every problem in his professional life. But he knew Chantel. He had sat across from her in a truck stop diner at 2 a.m. and watched her refuse his business card. He had seen the way she said, "I do not take handouts," and meant it with every cell in her body. Giving her money would not save her. It would break something inside her that was more important than money. So he did what he could. Kendrick took the case pro bono. Marlon connected Chantel with the National Women's Law Center, an organization that had been fighting pregnancy discrimination since before Chantel was born. They assigned a case advocate who called Chantel every other day not to check on the case, but to check on her. And quietly through the Reed Foundation's existing partnership with a nonprofit that subsidized elder care for low-income families, Marlon arranged for Patrice Edwards's nursing home costs to be covered. The application Chantel had submitted 4 months ago, the one she had given up on, the one that had disappeared into the bureaucratic void, was suddenly approved. A letter arrived at her trailer. "Dear Miss Edwards, we are pleased to inform you." She cried for 20 minutes. She thought it was a miracle. She did not know it was Marlon, and he intended to keep it that way. Then Yvette called Kendrick. She had been thinking about it for 3 days, lying awake at night, thinking about Maria, who Dale had squeezed out last year, thinking about Chantel on the storage room floor, thinking about her own 3 children and what she would want someone to do if it were her. "I have records," Yvette told Kendrick on the phone. Her voice was steady, but her hands were not. "Text messages from Dale telling us not to report injuries. Timesheets that do not match the hours we actually worked. Schedules that had me and Chantel working 12-hour shifts with no overtime pay. I kept copies of everything. On my phone, screenshots. I have been keeping them for 2 years. Why?" Kendrick asked. "Because I knew someday someone would be brave enough to use them. And if Chantel can stand up, then so can I." The case was no longer just Chantel's. It was 27 employees, 6 years of violations, $340,000 in unpaid wages, and a paper trail that Dale Buckner had been too arrogant or too careless to destroy. The Portland Tribune reporter called on a Thursday afternoon. Chantel was sitting in her trailer, her feet up on a pillow, the baby pressing against her ribs. The phone buzzed on the table. She looked at the screen. An unfamiliar number. A Portland area code. She let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Marlon was on the phone with Kendrick in his Portland office when Chantel texted him. Just 2 words. Reporter called. Marlon called her back immediately. "You do not have to talk to them," he said. "This is your choice, nobody else's." "I know," Chantel said. "But what if I do?" "Then you will be speaking for every woman who could not." Silence. The baby kicked. Chantel looked at the phone still buzzing on the table. The reporter had called back. She picked up. The reporter's name was Elena Vasquez. She was 36 years old, a labor beat journalist who had been covering workplace conditions in Oregon for 8 years. She was good at her job. She was also a mother. And when Chantel started talking, Elena did not interrupt. She did not redirect. She did not try to find the angle. She just listened. Chantel did not tell her story like a victim. She told it like a witness, calmly, precisely, with the specific gravity of someone who had memorized every number, every date, every moment where the system had looked at her and decided she was not worth protecting. She talked about Appleton's and the restructuring that was not a restructuring. She talked about Darnell and the phone call that ended with a blocked number. She talked about Patrice and the stroke and the $2,200 a month. She talked about the iron griddle and the $11.50 an hour, and the 3-minute bathroom breaks, and the fall in the storage room, and the man who asked her if she broke anything and meant the cans. Elena asked the question every reporter asks, the one they save for the end. What do you want people to know? Chantel was quiet for a moment. Then she said 3 sentences that would end up in the headline. That being poor is not a character flaw. That needing help is not weakness, and that no woman should have to risk her baby's life to make rent. The story went up on a Friday. By Saturday morning, it had been picked up by 3 national outlets. By Sunday, the hashtag Protect Working Mothers was trending. By Monday, Chantel's phone had not stopped buzzing. Messages from women in every state. Waitresses, cashiers, warehouse workers, nurses' aides, women who had worked through their pregnancies in pain and silence because the alternative was homelessness. They wrote to her because she had said the thing they had been swallowing for years. Boley opened a formal investigation into all 3 iron griddle locations. On the following Wednesday, state auditors arrived at each diner simultaneously at 9 a.m. with subpoenas for 6 years of payroll records, timesheets, insurance documentation, and employee files. Dale Buckner stood in the parking lot of his flagship location watching the auditors carry boxes to their vehicles. His face was the color of old paper. The investigation confirmed everything. $340,000 in unpaid overtime across 27 employees, falsified timesheets, lapsed workers' compensation insurance, systematic denial of pregnancy accommodations, retaliatory termination. The franchise parent company revoked Dale's operating agreement within 2 weeks. The diners closed. Dale faced civil fines and a referral to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges related to insurance fraud. When Chantel heard the news, she was sitting in Yvette's kitchen. Yvette had made tea. The baby was due any day. Chantel's ankles were swollen. Her back ached, but she was not at a diner. She was not standing. She was not smiling at strangers who did not see her. She was sitting in a warm kitchen with a friend who had fought alongside her, and she was not celebrating. I did not want to destroy him, Chantel said quietly. She was looking at her hands. I wanted him to see us. She did not say it with anger. She did not say it with satisfaction. She said it with something closer to sorrow. Because Chantel understood something that most people never learn. That the opposite of cruelty is not revenge. It is visibility. It is being seen, being counted, being treated like a human being instead of a line item on a franchise report. It happened that night, 2 weeks early. The contractions started at 9:45 p.m., irregular at first, then closer, then impossible to ignore. Yvette drove her to Mercy General, the hospital 20 minutes from the trailer park. The same hospital where Chantel had gone for her prenatal visits. The same hospital that had told her she needed rest. The rest she could never afford. Yvette called Marlon from the hospital parking lot. It is happening, she said. She is in labor. Marlon was in his study in Portland. Alone, he hung up the phone, stood very still for 30 seconds. Then he grabbed his keys and walked to the car. He drove east on Highway 84. The same road, the same darkness, the same wind farms spinning against the night sky. But this time, the drive felt different. The first time he had driven this highway, he was running. Running from a board decision he could not stop. Running from a ghost he could not face. Running from the man he was becoming and the man he had promised his mother he would be. This time, he was driving towards something. toward a hospital room where a woman he had met 2 weeks ago was bringing a life into the world, toward a second chance he did not deserve, but was determined not to waste. He arrived at 1:15 a.m. The hospital was quiet, that particular brand of nighttime hospital quiet that is not silence but rather the sound of dozens of small emergencies happening behind closed doors. He found the maternity ward on the 3rd floor. Yvette was in the waiting area, her coat still on a paper cup of coffee growing cold in her hands. "How is she?" Marlon asked. Yvette looked up. "She is strong," she said. "Stronger than she thinks." Marlon nodded. He did not go in. He did not ask to be let into the delivery room. That was not his place. He was not the father. He was not family. He was a man who had walked into a diner at 2 in the morning and had his life rearranged by a woman in a stained apron with swollen ankles and more courage than anyone he had ever met in a boardroom. He stood in the hallway, his back against the wall, his eyes closed, and he thought about his mother, Denise Reed, the woman who had given birth to him on the floor of a truck stop diner in Alabama, the woman who had held him with hands that were cracked from bleach and dish soap. The woman who had died at 39 years old because the richest country on earth had decided that a waitress's kidneys were not worth saving. Marlon folded his hands, pressed them together, and he prayed, for the first time in 30 years. Not to a God he believed in, not to a God he understood, but to whatever force in the universe had put him in that diner on that night at that hour in front of that woman. He prayed that this time the story would end differently. The baby was born at 3:47 a.m. A girl, 6 pounds 4 ounces, healthy, screaming, alive. The nurse came out to the waiting area 20 minutes later. Yvette jumped up. Marlon stood slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Mother and baby are doing great," the nurse said. "She is asking for you." She looked at Yvette. "Both of you." Marlon hesitated. Yvette took his arm. "Come on," she said. "She wants you there." They walked into the room. Chantel was propped up in bed, her hair matted with sweat, her face exhausted and luminous. The baby was in her arms, wrapped in a white hospital blanket, a pink knitted cap on her head. Tiny, perfect, making small sounds that were not quite cries, more like announcements. Chantel looked up at Marlon. Her eyes were wet. Her smile was real. The first real smile he had ever seen on her face, not the mask she wore at the diner, not the practiced expression of a woman who had learned to hide her pain. This was something else entirely. This was joy that had fought its way through a wall of suffering and come out the other side, blinking and raw and beautiful. "I want you to meet someone," Chantel said. Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. Marlon stepped closer. The baby's eyes were closed. Her fingers, impossibly small, curled around the edge of the blanket. "Her name is Denise," Chantel said. Marlon stopped. He looked at Chantel, then at the baby, then back at Chantel. "Denise, after your mother," Chantel said, "because she should have had someone fighting for her too." Marlon Reed had sat across from senators and not flinched. He had negotiated deals worth billions with a steady hand and a steady voice. He had buried his mother at 11 years old and had not cried at the funeral because his grandmother told him that Reed men do not cry. They hold it. They keep moving. He stood in that hospital room looking at a baby named after the woman he could not save, and the holding broke. The thing he had been carrying for 30 years, the grief and the guilt and the rage and the love, all of it came apart at once. Tears ran down his face. He did not wipe them. He did not turn away. He just stood there, a man worth $4.2 billion, crying in a hospital room in rural Oregon because a waitress had named her daughter after his mother. "Thank you," he whispered. It was the only thing he could say. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was true. Over the next 6 months, things changed. Not in the dramatic, cinematic way that stories on screens usually end. Not with a single grand gesture or a tearful speech or a check with too many zeros. Things changed the way they change in real life. Slowly, painfully, one step at a time. Boley issued its final ruling 8 weeks after baby Denise was born. Dale Buckner was ordered to pay $340,000 in back wages to 27 current and former employees. Chantel's share was $47,000, unpaid overtime, wrongful termination damages, penalties. It was not a life-changing fortune. It was not $1 million or a new house or a corner office, but it was 6 months of breathing room. 6 months of not doing the math at 3 a.m. 6 months of not choosing between groceries and gas. Marlon did not hire Chantel. He thought about it. He wanted to. But he knew that if he did, every article, every comment section, every person who heard the story would reduce it to the same fairy tale they always told. Billionaire saves poor woman, gives her a job. Happy ending. That was not what this was. Chantel did not need saving. She needed a fair fight, and she had fought it herself. What Marlon did instead was something quieter and something bigger. Through the Reed Foundation, he launched a workforce development grant specifically for single parents looking to transition into healthcare education or skilled trades. Applications were reviewed by an independent panel. Marlon had no say in who was selected. He was not on the committee. His name did not appear anywhere on the application form. Chantel applied in February. She wrote her essay at 2 a.m. with Denise sleeping in a bassinet beside her and the glow of her cracked phone casting light on the page. She wrote about Patrice, her mother, and the stroke that had changed everything. She wrote about the months of caring for her, learning to read vitals and manage medications and navigate a healthcare system that seemed designed to confuse the people who needed it most. She wrote that she wanted to become a certified nursing assistant because she had learned more about caring for people from holding her mother's hand during a stroke than any classroom could teach. She was accepted, not because of Marlon, because of her words, because of her story, because the panel read her essay and saw what Marlon had seen in a diner at 2 a.m. Someone worth investing in. Marlon used Chantel's case as a catalyst for something larger. He met with Oregon state legislators. He testified briefly and without drama before a committee reviewing enforcement gaps in the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. He did not make speeches. He did not hold press conferences. He showed them numbers. The number of complaints filed, the number that were investigated, the gap between the two, the gap between the law and the reality. He established the Denise Reed Initiative, a program that provided free legal information and workplace rights education to pregnant workers in the service industry. A website, a hotline, pamphlets in both English and Spanish, distributed at free clinics and WIC offices and laundromats across Oregon. It was not a revolution. It was a pamphlet. But Marlon knew that his mother had died in part because nobody had ever handed her a pamphlet. Nobody had ever told her that the law was on her side, and that silence had killed her more surely than the preeclampsia. Back in Portland, Marlon returned to his boardroom. The same table, the same faces, the same vote that had sent him driving into the night 2 months ago. 4,000 layoffs. Optimization. The bottom line. This time he did not argue. He did not present projections. He did not negotiate. He told them a story about a diner on Highway 84, about a woman named Chantel, about another woman named Denise who had died 30 years ago because the system she worked in did not consider her a person. And then he said the words that would define the rest of his career. I spent 30 years building this company. I will not let it become the system that killed my mother. The board voted again. This time, by a margin of 7-6, they approved a restructuring plan instead of mass layoffs, reduced executive bonuses, voluntary early retirement packages, a hiring freeze. It saved 3,200 of the 4,000 jobs. Not perfect, not a fairy tale, but 3,200 families who would not get the call, 3,200 people who would not have to do the math. Chantel and Marlon did not fall in love. That is not this story. What they became was something rarer than romance, something harder to name. They became the kind of friends that can only be forged when two people walk through the same darkness and come out carrying pieces of each other. Marlon was baby Denise's godfather. Once a month he drove the 4 hours east from Portland to the trailer park, not in the Range Rover, not in the Escalade. He came in a truck he had bought specifically for these trips, an old Ford with 200,000 miles on it, because the trailer park was not a place for luxury vehicles, and Marlon knew that. He came because that trailer, with its leaky faucet and its thin walls and its refrigerator covered in ultrasound photos and nursing school schedules, was the place where he remembered who he was before the billions. Before the board votes and the penthouse and the shoes that cost $4,000, before all of it. He came because Denise the baby gripped his finger when he held her and looked at him with eyes that saw nothing about his net worth and everything about his heart. 6 months after the baby was born, Chantel graduated from her certified nursing assistant program. The ceremony was in a community college auditorium that smelled like floor polish and cheap flowers. Yvette was in the third row crying. Marlon was in the back standing because he did not want to take a seat from someone's family. In the front row, in a wheelchair with a blanket over her knees, sat Patrice Edwards, Chantel's mother. Her right side still drooped slightly. Her speech still came out uneven on bad days. But she was there. She was alive. And in her lap, wrapped in a yellow blanket, was 6-month-old Denise, sleeping through the applause. Chantel walked across the stage in scrubs, new scrubs, the first new clothes she had bought in over a year. Her name was called, and she took her certificate, and she looked out at the audience and found her mother's eyes. And Patrice, who could not clap because her right hand did not work the way it used to, raised her left hand and pressed it against her heart. The next morning, Chantel drove to Mercy General Hospital for her first shift. Day shift. 8 to 4. Health insurance that started on day 1, 12 paid sick days a year. And a break room with a chair she could sit in whenever she needed to. She parked her car, looked at herself in the rearview mirror. The circles under her eyes were lighter now. Not gone, but lighter. She straightened her badge. Chantel Edwards, CNA. Then she looked at the car seat in the back where Denise was sleeping, ready to be dropped off at the hospital's employee child care center. Almost there, baby, Chantel whispered. Mama made it. Chantel did not need a billionaire to save her. She needed someone to show her the door. She walked through it herself, on her own swollen feet, with her own trembling hands, with a pride that bent but never broke. That is what this story was always about. Not rescue, not charity, choice. The choice to fight when the system told you to be quiet. The choice to stand when the world told you to kneel. But there is one more moment, a quiet one. It happened on a highway at 2 a.m., 6 months after everything changed. And you absolutely need to hear it, because it is the moment where this whole story comes full circle. 6 months later, 2 a.m., Highway 84. Chantel was driving home, not from a diner, from a hospital, her hospital, Mercy General. She had just finished an evening shift. 4 to midnight, 8 hours, health insurance, paid breaks. A locker with her name on it. She was tired, but it was a different kind of tired. The kind that comes from work that matters. Work that has a future attached to it. The highway was empty. The same stretch of road she had driven 100 times before. The same wind farms spinning in the dark. The same stars. But everything else was different. She saw the sign first. The iron griddle. But the neon was dark. All of it. Not just the missing letters. The whole sign. The parking lot was empty. The windows were black. A chain hung across the door with a padlock that had already started to rust. Chantel pulled into the gravel lot, turned off the engine, sat for a moment in the silence. Then she got out. She walked to the front door. The glass was dirty, smudged with handprints and rain streaks and the ghosts of 1,000 late-night arrivals. She cupped her hands against the glass and looked inside. The booths were still there. The Formica counter, the coffee machine, the dead jukebox in the corner. Everything frozen in place like a photograph of a life she used to live. She remembered the fluorescent light above table 4, the one that flickered like a dying conscience. She remembered the smell of burnt coffee and old grease. She remembered the way her ankles swelled inside her shoes, the way the baby kicked when she stood too long, the way Dale said clock is ticking like her pain was an inconvenience on his schedule. She remembered the 3-minute bathroom breaks, The $1 tips, the fall in the storage room, the cold concrete against her skin, and she remembered the man in the last booth who did not touch his coffee. She did not cry. She had cried enough. She just stood there, one hand pressed flat against the glass, and said 2 words. Thank you. Not to the diner, not to Dale, not to the fluorescent lights, or the cracked formica, or the broken jukebox. She said it to the woman she used to be, the one who stood behind that counter at 2 in the morning, 8 months pregnant, with duct tape on her shoes and $127 to her name, and refused to fall apart. The one who kept pouring coffee when her body was begging her to stop. The one who looked a billionaire in the eye and said, I do not take handouts. The one who picked up the phone and said, I need someone to help me fight. That woman had saved her. Chantel turned and walked back to the car. In the back seat, baby Denise was sleeping in her car seat, 6 months old. The highway lights fell across her face in soft gold stripes. Her tiny fingers were curled around the edge of her blanket. She looked like peace. She looked like proof. Chantel started the engine, pulled onto Highway 84, and drove into the night. But this time she knew exactly where she was going. Chantel Edwards did not get a fairy tale ending. She got something better. She got a fighting chance. And that is all most of us need. Not a billionaire's wallet, not a miracle, not a magic check, or a corner office, or a Hollywood ending with swelling music and a sunset. Just someone who sees you. Really sees you. Not your uniform, not your paycheck. Not the way you look at 2 in the morning under fluorescent lights, but you, the person underneath all of it, and says, you deserve better than this. Let me help you fight for it. This story is not about wealth or poverty. It is about visibility. About the women and men working midnight shifts in truck stops and gas stations and diners across this country. Invisible to the system that profits from their labor. They are not asking for handouts. They are not asking for fairy tales. They are asking to be seen. They are asking for a system that does not require them to choose between their bodies and their bills. And somewhere tonight, on Highway 84, the lights of another diner flickered on, and inside, another woman in an apron put her hand on her back, took a breath, and started her shift. If this story made you feel something, hit that like button. Drop a comment below. I want to hear from you. Have you ever worked a shift when your body was telling you to stop? What kept you going? Tell me, because your story matters too. Subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Real stories, impossible choices, and proof that dignity always wins in the end. I will see you in the next one. One last thing before I go. This story is fictional, but the issues it explores are painfully real. In 2026, the United States still has no federal guarantee of paid maternity leave. Millions of pregnant workers in low-wage jobs face exactly the choices Chantel faced every single day. If you or someone you know is dealing with workplace pregnancy discrimination, you can contact the National Women's Law Center or your state's Department of Labor. They are there. They are free, and they can help. This story was inspired by real conversations with real workers, waitresses and cashiers and warehouse packers and nursing aides who shared their stories with me and trusted me to get it right. I hope I did. And I will keep telling these stories because I believe with everything in me that the measure of a country is not its GDP. It is how it treats the people who keep it running at 2 a.m. Thank you for staying until the end. That means more than you know.